A simple title, but behind these words lies 100 years of secrets, of inventions stolen, of fortunes made and lost, of governments that held back technologies that could have changed everything. One man built an engine in a shed, with almost no money, no support, and no one believed him. Yet today, every single passenger jet in the sky flies because of what he did. And the men who controlled the money made sure the world almost never found out. But that is only the beginning, because right now, as this video plays, a new engine is being built that will make everything before it completely obsolete. The question is, who will control it? Welcome to Warplane Mysteries, the channel where history does not just sit in a museum. It speaks directly to anyone willing to listen. Now, before we go any further, there is a small favor to ask. You see, subscribing to this channel is a little like carrying a pocket watch. It is something a wise person does quietly, without being told twice. So if you are someone who values things that actually matter, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Do it the same way you would wind that old watch every morning, deliberately, and without hesitation. And one more thing, drop a comment below and tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? Whether it is London or Lahore, New York or Nairobi. This community wants to know. There is a particular kind of tragedy that does not announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, dressed in paperwork, sitting behind government desks, wearing the face of caution, and in the story of the jet engine. That tragedy has a name: Frank Whittle. In 1928, young Royal Air Force cadets sat down to write a student thesis. He was not asked to change the world. He was simply asked to write about the future of aircraft design. But what he wrote was not a student paper. It was a blueprint for the next century of aviation. Whittle calculated with extraordinary precision that if aircraft were ever to fly truly fast and truly far, they would need to fly high, at altitudes where piston engines suffocated, where propellers became useless. He concluded at just 21 years of age that an entirely new kind of engine was needed. Not an improvement on existing technology, a replacement of it. He called it the turbojet. Air drawn in, compressed, mixed with fuel, ignited, expelled with tremendous force. One continuous, elegant, unstoppable process. No pistons, no crankshafts, no vibration, just pure, controlled thrust. The idea was brilliant. The response from those in power was devastating. The British Air Ministry reviewed Whittle's proposal and concluded, with bureaucratic confidence, that they were not interested. One senior scientist reviewed his calculations, pointed out a minor error, and sent him away. Industry showed no enthusiasm either. By 1929, the patent had been filed. The idea was documented. The mathematics were sound, and yet Britain did almost nothing. Here is where the business lesson cuts deepest. Whittle did not fail because his idea was wrong. He failed, temporarily, because the institutions surrounding him lacked the imagination to see what he had built. This is a pattern that repeats itself throughout industrial history with uncomfortable regularity. The innovator sees clearly. The institution sees risk. And in that gap between vision and institutional courage, fortunes are lost, decades are wasted, and competitors fill the space left behind. Because while Britain hesitated, Germany did not. Whittle's patents, freely available because the Air Ministry declined to classify them, made their way across the Channel. German engineers read them carefully, and a young scientist named Hans von Ohain, inspired by the same fundamental frustration with noisy, vibrating piston engines, began his own quiet work. He found a private backer immediately. Ernst Heinkel, one of Germany's most ambitious aircraft manufacturers, did not ask for government permission. He did not form committees. He did not commission reports. He simply said, "Build it." And on August 27, 1939, Just days before the Second World War began, Germany flew the world's first jet-powered aircraft. Britain, the nation that had conceived the turbojet, watched from behind. But the story does not end in German victory, because Whittle, underfunded and overworked, kept building. In a small, cramped foundry in Lutterworth, with second-hand parts and a team held together by sheer belief, he proved his engine worked. And on May 15, 1941, Britain's experimental jet aircraft left the ground. An officer watching from the airfield later described the moment with perfect simplicity. It had no propeller, and an extraordinary whining noise came from it. The jet age had arrived in Britain. But what happened next revealed something deeply important for every entrepreneur and business strategist watching today. Whittle's company, Powerjets, was nationalized by the very government it had served. His turbofan project, canceled. His supersonic engine program, canceled. The man who gave Britain the jet engine was quietly removed from the industry he had created. And the commercial advantage that should have belonged to Britain was handed, piece by piece, to others. America received the Whittle engine in 1941. General Electric built their version in 6 months. Within a decade, American jet manufacturing had surpassed everyone. The lesson here is not about betrayal. 'Tis about something colder, something more instructive. Invention without institutional protection is simply a gift to your competitors. Whittle invented, Britain hesitated. America scaled, and the market, as it always does, rewarded the one who moved fastest. There is a moment in every ambitious enterprise when the people building it stop asking, "Can we do this?" and forget entirely to ask, "Should we?" That moment, in the history of aviation, produced the most beautiful, most expensive, and most instructive commercial failure the world has ever seen. It was called Concorde, and its story is not simply about an aircraft. It is about what happens when national pride sits down at the boardroom table and pretends to be a business strategy. The year was 1962. Europe was wounded. 2 world wars had drained its treasuries, fractured its confidence, and handed industrial supremacy to America and the Soviet Union, Britain and France. Nations that had once defined the boundaries of global power found themselves watching from a distance as others wrote the future. And then, someone asked a dangerous question. What if Europe built a passenger aircraft that flew faster than the speed of sound? Not a military machine. Not an experimental prototype hidden in a classified hangar. A commercial airliner. One that ordinary passengers, well, extraordinarily wealthy ordinary passengers, could board at Heathrow and step off at JFK. In 3.5 hours, the idea was intoxicating. On November 28, 1962, Britain and France signed a treaty with no cancellation clause. Read that again? No cancellation clause. To governments, committing public money to a project from which there was legally no exit. In any serious business negotiation, that single detail would have ended the conversation before it began. But this was not a business negotiation. This was a statement of identity, and identity, as history repeatedly demonstrates, is a catastrophically expensive thing to build an airline around. The engineering achievement that followed was genuinely extraordinary. Over 600 subcontractors, 200,000 workers, round-the-clock testing for 18 consecutive months. New materials were invented specifically for Concorde. New engine configurations were designed from the ground up. The drooping nose, the Ogivell Delta Wing, the Olympus 593 engines. Every single element pushed the boundaries of what human engineering could produce. When Concorde 001 lifted off from Toulouse in March of 1969, it was not just a plane taking flight. It was a declaration. Europe is still here. Europe still leads. The crowds were enormous. The coverage was global. The pride was overwhelming. And somewhere, beneath all of that noise, quiet, uncomfortable set of numbers was being ignored. Each Concorde cost $31 million per aircraft. The sonic boom it produced was so severe that America banned it from flying coast to coast. That single regulatory decision eliminated 1/3 of the entire potential market. Airlines that had placed orders quietly withdrew them. The Chinese flirted with purchase. The Iranians expressed interest. Pan Am placed early orders. One by one, they all walked away. Because the fundamental economic equation never worked. Concorde could carry 100 passengers. The Boeing 747, which entered service at almost exactly the same time, could carry more than 400, at a fraction of the operating cost. At ticket prices ordinary business travelers could actually justify. The market had not asked for the fastest aircraft ever built. The market had asked for the most efficient. And Europe, dazzled by its own engineering brilliance, had answered a question nobody was paying to have solved. Only British Airways and Air France ultimately purchased the aircraft. Not because the economics convinced them, but because their governments essentially forced the arrangement to prevent total collapse. For the next 3 decades, Concorde survived not through commercial strength, but through government subsidy, elite clientele, and the sheer magnetism of its own legend. It became a sanctuary for the super wealthy. A trophy flight, a dinner party story. I flew Concorde. 3 words that meant everything. To a market too small to sustain an industry, when Concorde Flight 4590 crashed in the year 2000, and the September 11th attacks suppressed global air travel 1 year later. Both British Airways and Air France made the same quiet calculation. The numbers had never worked. They had simply been too proud to say so publicly. And in 2003, most recognizable aircraft in the world was retired. It's not because the engineering had failed, but because the business model had never truly existed. The lesson Concorde leaves behind is precise and merciless. Prestige is not a market. Admiration is not revenue. And a product that only governments can afford to build, and only millionaires can afford to use, is not a commercial enterprise. It is an extraordinarily expensive monument to the danger of mistaking ambition for strategy.